That went wrong, didn't it? Trying to be all professional. Goes wrong again. Hey up, it's Steve from the Old Yorkshire Geek. And I'm back with my Sunday news roundup. Just some news stories that I thought might be interesting. I've actually not read any of them. Just looked at the titles. But we'll have the applause again. Just remember to switch my thingy-majig on. All right, shut up. Right, so... hope you enjoyed the pre-show music. I just thought I'd try something a bit different. Other channels have pre-shows. Some of them have really, really long pre-shows. Echo-based network. I'm looking at you. But I just thought I'd put some music on. A bit of rock. Right, anyway, so let's get on with this. Let's get the window up. Hopefully it's going to work. Yes, it is. There we go. First story is from flickeringmyth.com. For some reason, I think it's rude, but I don't know. As usual, links are in the description down below. And don't forget, like and subscribe, share the videos, drop a comment, hit the notification bell if you're subscribed already. I'm also on Rumble and Spotify and Amazon Music Podcasts and Google Podcasts. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. I've covered my books up. Hang on, where are they? Because the links are in the description for those, as are the links. There they are. For me 2 books. Mercury Rapids, light-hearted sci-fi action-adventure about UFOs and stuff like that. How can you be light-hearted about UFOs? Every time I write something. Silent Predator... a short horror novella about big cats eating people in North Yorkshire. Based on a real place, maybe? Don't know. Maybe not. Right, here we go. So there you go. First story from Flickering Myth. Jonathan Groff joins new Doctor Who series. There's been a lot of news about this. Is he famous? Because I don't know him. But anyway. The cast for Doctor Who is beginning to take shape, preparing fans for the upcoming new era. The latest casting news comes from Jonathan Groff joining Ncuti Gatwa, Millie Gibson and Jinx Monsoon. The upcoming series marks the return of fan favourite creator Russell T Davies. Little is known about Groff's role in the new series, but Empire, the magazine and website, notes Groff will first show up during Ncuti Gatwa's initial run as the 15th incarnation of the Doctor, before adding he hops aboard the TARDIS. No, it's a film I've never seen. The Big Lebowski. Never seen it. I haven't. Never seen it. And there is, I presume, discussing joining the production, Jonathan Groff says, "Who is it? Is he famous? Tell me." I should have looked him up, but I didn't. Jonathan Groff says, "I am so thrilled to jump into the extraordinary mind of Russell T Davies and watch the incredible Ncuti Gatwa Saw in this iconic role." Oh, here we go. Groff is best known for his work in Mindhunter. Was that a Netflix series? It was a series, wasn't it, about serial killers and stuff, wasn't it? Which I didn't see. The Matrix Resurrections, which I did see, and it wasn't very good. It wasn't terrible either, but it wasn't very good. Glee, which I've never seen, and animated voice work like Frozen, which I have seen, because everybody's seen Frozen. Let it go. Davies, in a statement, says this is an incredible coup and a great honour. I'm sure he said it with a U in it, though, because he's British. To get such a huge star striding onto our set. So strap on your space boots. This is going to be a blast. Doctor Who returns in November 2023 with 3 special episodes featuring the iconic David Tennant as the 14th Doctor. 10th. It's the 10th Doctor. Stop calling him the 14th. For the show's 60th anniversary. Then we'll begin the new era with the next Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, who will take control of the TARDIS, and that's it. So there we go. So Jonathan Groff, I suppose Mindhunter and Matrix, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose he is famous, just not famous to me, although he does have a familiar... Is that from the Matrix? I bet it is. I bet it is. The latest Matrix. So there you go. Bit of Doctor Who news. Right, Star Wars, The Acolyte. Is it going to happen? Don't know. Release date, cast, plot for the Disney Plus series. A new Star Wars series is coming, but what do we know about the Acolyte, the High Republic era, and events 100 years before the Phantom Menace? And there's the new logo. I think it's the new one. New Disney Plus series Star Wars The Acolyte will explore an untapped region of the franchise by taking us back to the heyday of the Jedi Order. We're facing a new dawn in the galaxy far, far away, as it's no longer just the Skywalker saga that holds up the sci-fi staple. The gold-covered High Republic era has been explored in novels, but alongside Quantic Dream's upcoming Star Wars Eclipse video game... Oh, excuse me. I'm starting. The Acolyte lets us into the Jedi Order's most prosperous chapter. With a new story to tell and a typically all-star cast, here's everything you need to know. Has it? Here's everything you need to know about Star Wars The Acolyte release date, cast plot, and more. Right. There's Leslie Headland with a weirdly spelled name, Leslie Yee. Of course, former assistant to... Names gone. Tell it, as soon as I turn on this bloody camera, names just go. The little box in my brain that's got a big thing on that says names just opens up and they all sod off. You know the fella, he's in prison. Former assistant to him. Weinstein, that one. But which one? Harvey Weinstein. Former assistant to Harvey Weinstein during all that time, if you know what I mean. Right, The Acolyte is on course for a 2024 release date, expecting to follow in the footsteps of other shows like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka by airing weekly on Disney+, but will it? We will see. Because there's rumours they've just been given money for a pilot and not a full series, but we will see. At the 2019 premiere of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine, Variety asked Russian Doll's Leslie Headland whether she'd like to explore the High Republic era of Star Wars and asked what were her favourite Star Wars, and she replied, "I like all the Star Wars." Headland said she'd jump at the chance if Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy, and your little dog too, let her and buy Star Wars Day 2020, she was announced as the showrunner and writer of a female-centric, of course, Star Wars series. The series was later confirmed as The Acolyte, with Headland serving as showrunner, writer and executive producer on the 8-episode series. Other directors include The Witcher's Alex Garcia Lopez and South Korean-born American filmmaker Kogonada. I presume that's how you pronounce it. Principal photography took place during the Stagecraft Volume technology made famous... using the Stagecraft Volume technology made famous by The Mandalorian, of course, because I think everything's on that now, filmed on that now, by Disney. And it's starting to wear thin, while additional filming started in Portugal around March 2023. And there's the cast. Is it? Are they famous, are they? Oh, I know him, because he plays Chewie. He's playing a Wookiee, isn't it? Not Chewie. Oh, and there's the fella from Squid Game, isn't there, in there somewhere? Is it him? I don't know. Here we go. The cast of The Acolyte, left to right, Lee Jung-jae, Charlie Barnett, Rebecca Henderson, Daphne Keane. Oh, I know her. That's Daphne Keane. She was in Logan, wasn't she? She played the young girl in Logan. Amanda Stenberg, Leslie Headland, Manny Jacinto. Not him. Is he some sort of pugilist? I don't know. The name rings a bell. Dean Charles Chapman, Jodie Turner-Smith. Oh, there she is, Jodie Turner-Smith. Yes. It's all about the patriarchy. Yes. Just sake. And Eunice Suotomo. There we go. Heading up The Acolyte is the Hunger Games Amanda Stenberg, who has come a long way from playing the tragic Rue in 2012's first movie. You know what? I've only seen the first Hunger Games film. I've never got round to watching the others, and I hear they're quite good. And I did quite enjoy the first one. I've just never got round to it. I'm like that with the Fast and the Furious films. I think I saw the first two, and I've never got round to watching the rest. But I did quite enjoy them. Weird. That's me, I'm weird. Stenberg appeared alongside the rest of the cast at Star Wars Celebration 2023, but so far we only know she's playing a former Padawan. Well, they had to get everything into Star Wars Celebration 2023 because they've got nothing going, have they, really? So they had to, build stuff up that might not happen, like films and stuff. Footage aired at the celebration honed in on the Matrix's Carrie-Anne Moss. Oh yeah, she's in she allegedly using Force powers, confirming she's some form of Jedi or Force user at least. We know slightly more about who Rebecca Henderson will be playing with the Russian doll alumni. Must be alumnus, shouldn't it? Really, singular. confirmed as Vernestra. Whoa, I don't need to say that. The character was created for 2021's The High Republic, a test of courage novel, and is the youngest Jedi to achieve the rank of Jedi Master. I wonder who's going to play Geode, the sentient rock. I know they had them in Star Trek, you know, the Horta. They were sentient rocks, but at least they moved about and killed people and stuff. Elsewhere, Squid Game's Lee Jung-jae, probably pronouncing that wrong as well, is an unnamed Jedi Master who'll be joining Logan's Daphne Keane and Russian Doll's Charlie Barnett as young Jedi. Rounding off the cast, there are mystery roles for the Good Places, Manny Jacinto, Revengers, Margarita Levieva. I'm probably pronouncing all these wrong. I do apologise. Game of Thrones as Dean Charles Chapman, and Murder Mystery 2's Jodie Turner-Smith. Yes, patriarchy. There's a familiar face in the form of solo Star Wars stories Jonas Suotamo. Although he's not reprising his role as Chewbacca, it looks like he'll be playing a much-hyped Jedi Wookiee. We saw one, didn't we, on the High Republic? A bit of artwork, didn't we? We saw a Jedi Wookiee in that. Maybe he's playing that one. Maybe he's playing a different one. I don't know. The Acolyte's unique place around 100 years before the events of The Phantom Menace makes a cameo from a certain Master Yoda possible, although everyone is staying tight-lipped on that one. Of course they are, and of course he'll be in it at some point. He will. He's got to be. And there's a clip, a screenshot from The Phantom Menace. Not the original version, because that's not Puppet Yoda, that's CG Yoda, isn't it, by the looks of it? I think. Could be. Looks it. Because the puppet one from Phantom Menace looked weird, didn't it? The Acolyte takes place at an exciting point in the Star Wars timeline. Few say so. And if you weren't already stoked for its arrival, Headland told fans at Star Wars Celebration 2023 how she pitched it as Frozen meets Kill Bill to Kennedy. Unbelievable. Why do you say it's a really good Star Wars story? Kathy. You could tell it's like James Bond, because she likes James Bond, doesn't she? She doesn't like George Lucas, though. The official synopsis, via Deadline, talks about a former Padawan reuniting with her Jedi Master to solve a series of crimes, which sounds a lot like CSI Coruscant. So there probably is one. It probably is a CSI Coruscant. There's a CSI everything else, isn't there? CSI North Allerton. Despite all the Jedi castings, the Acolyte is rumoured to be the franchise's first Sith-centric outing. The name hints at this, as while training Jedi are referred to as Padawans, the Sith equivalent is an Acolyte. Either way, Headland says the series takes place during a time the bad guys are outnumbered. Well, the bad guys are always outnumbered. There's only two of them, isn't there? Obviously, the Acolyte setting 100 years before The Phantom Menace takes us further back than we've been before, until we get to James Mangold's Jedi origin movie, if it ever happens. Explaining why The Acolyte is something of an Episode 1 prequel, Headland told Vanity Fair, "My question in watching The Phantom Menace was always like, well, how did things get to this point? How do we get to where a Sith Lord can infiltrate the Senate and none of the Jedi pick up on it?" And there's, obviously that's Yoda in the High Republic artwork. Headland has been heavily inspired by the nixed expanded universe of Legends canon. It's not nixed, it was just renamed Legends, wasn't it, from the expanded universe? But they keep bringing parts in, don't they, from it? Even George did. Even George brought in the expanded universe. Coruscant's from the expanded universe. Boonta Eve is from the expanded universe, etc. Who else were there? That bounty hunter woman that we saw in Aura Singh, she's from the expanded universe. We saw her in Phantom Menace, didn't we, briefly? Then again, we've seen the likes of Boba Fett's survival, Grand Admiral Thrawn, there we go, and even Palpatine's, Ovaltine's, Resurrection, Love It or Loathe It, brought back into mainline canon, meaning this is an exciting time for fans of the old ways. In the Vanity Fair interview, Headland described this period as an age of wealth and innovation for the galaxy, with white-clad Jedi inspiring awe and the dark side of the Force seemingly erased from existence. Well, that's what it's supposed to be like during Phantom Menace times, wasn't it? The Republic had become decadent and complacent. The Jedi had become complacent, hadn't they? Because there'd been no Sith around for 1,000 years. And then it all went pear-shaped, didn't it? We all know how that goes, with Headland saying she was drawn to the idea... Sorry, fleas! With Headland saying she was drawn to the idea of who was practicing the dark side at this time. And that must be from Star Wars Celebration. Yes, it is. That's Amanda Stenberg, Lee Jung-jae, and somebody else obscured by the microphone. Stenberg shed some light on what to expect. This advert's going on a while, isn't it? I think it's nearly done. Stenberg shed some light on what to expect, warning Collider how the Jedi might not be the heroes we think of them as. Well, that was the same again in the prequel trilogy. They'd become complacent and cocky, and they thought they were better than, they were. But anyway, what does it look like when the Jedi have complete unchecked power, like they did in, the prequel trilogy? What are their relationships like to the government institutions, like in the prequel trilogy? And people who have issues with their power, what are they like? Like in the prequel trilogy. The High Republic era has been growing since its inception in 2021, and with the third phase, Trials of the Jedi, kicking off in November 2023 with George Mann's The Eye of Darkness, there's plenty of reading to catch up on before Star Wars The Acolyte releases, if... I'm sure the pilot will release. On Disney+. With an all-star cast and new lore to explore, Headland series will surely make up, for the fumbles of George Lucas's prequels. Fumbles. Yeah, they weren't perfect. They weren't by a long shot. But the prequels have been better than anything, well, apart from Rogue One. Maybe most of The Force Awakens. But they've been better than anything that... Disney's produced. The Acolyte will stream exclusively on Disney+. But as I said, the story is knocking about. Go away. That it's only been budgeted for a pilot episode, like a sizzle reel essentially. But I think they're big enough to do a full pilot episode. But I don't know if it's been given the order for a full season. I don't know. That's the rumours that's floating around, so I can't really say. And there's another rumour that Kathleen Kennedy went in for a meeting with Bob Iger, the boss of Disney, and came out not very happy looking and didn't say a word, apparently. That's another rumour that's going around. So maybe... and we all know there's, budget constraints at Disney, and they're looking to... lay off people, and so maybe her dreams of Star Wars have been curtailed by Uncle Bob, but we will see. But anyway, that's all we know about the Acolyte so far. Right, move on to Jon Favreau, sticking with Star Wars. Jon Favreau explains Star Wars genres, praises the Clone Wars, and there he is. Jon Favreau is no stranger to the Star Wars franchise, having created The Mandalorian for Disney+. He wanted to do a Boba Fett series, didn't he? But that didn't happen. Recently, Favreau explained how subgenres within... Well, it did happen eventually, didn't it? How subgenres within Star Wars make it interesting to work on. What did Jon Favreau say about Star Wars? While speaking on the Dagobah Dispatch podcast, Favreau discussed... Sorry if you can hear noises. It's a lovely day. I've got my window open, and there's some kids outside making noises. Little baskets. I'm going to go shut the window. Noisy little sods. Anyway, where were we? While speaking on the Dagobah Dispatch podcast, Favreau discussed how Star Wars projects can be anything from war movies to samurai films. I better make sure we're still broadcasting on to. Are we still going? It looks like it. Not that any bugger's watching. Right, anyway. When people think of Star Wars as a genre... Oh, I forgot to move that over, didn't I? I do apologise. There we go. It really is a number of subgenres within the Star Wars genre, Favreau explained, because those were George Lucas's influences. So it could feel like a Western, it could feel like a World War II film, it could feel like a samurai film, it could feel like a Bloody Flash Gordon serial. That was the original inspiration. And so you could push limits. Although the samurai thing, that's the major, Hidden Fortress and all that. Anyway, the director went on to praise Star Wars The Clone Wars for how it jumped between genres and said that this quality is what keeps him working on the franchise, plus probably contracts. Especially on The Clone Wars, they deviated into many different genres, to thrillers and to noir and different types of adventures and different tones, Favreau noted. So that's what's keeping us engaged, and why I'm continuing my collaboration here is because it's never like you're just doing one thing. There's always room, via Entertainment Weekly. Quite a few Star Wars projects are currently on the horizon, including Disney Plus series Ahsoka, The Acolyte, which we just talked about, and Skeleton Crew, which there's not a lot of buzz about that, is there? Oddly. It's weird, that. It's got Jude Law in it. Proper wooden, as my mate would say. He don't like Jude Law. Although I do. He's Sky Captain. He'll always be my Sky Captain, will Jude Law. On the gaming side, Star Wars Jedi Survivor was recently released, while Star Wars Hunters, Star Wars Eclipse, and a remake of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic are all on the horizon. Oh, that's it. Yeah, so it's just saying, that was a pointless article, wasn't it? It was like based on, 2 sentences from him. 3 sentences, sorry. Saying, a Western, a World War II film, or a samurai film. There's other stuff in there as well. It's a mishmash, isn't it? It covers everything. But most genre work these days in cinema and TV is a mishmash of influences, because that's how it works, isn't it? Everybody's influenced by something. So you take what you know. You write what you know, don't you? And sometimes you just rip things off and call it an homage. I've done it myself. Done it myself in my books. Notably Quatermass and the Pit. If you read Mercury Rapids, there's a big Quatermass and the Pit section in there. But never mind. Right, moving on. This 25-year-old sci-fi disaster movie is still lauded by scientists. Here's why. Salon spoke with scientists who praised Deep Impact, top film, and with others who helped make it. Miles better than Armageddon. Came out the same year. There's Morgan Freeman as the president, of course. In anticipation of the 25-year anniversary of Deep Impact, Dr. Clark R. Chapman and his wife, Y. Chapman, is that a name, Y? It's just named after a chromosome. A male one, of all things. Decided to rewatch the classic disaster flick. Dr. Chapman is uniquely qualified to assess the movie's merits. Deep Impact is about a comet the size of Mount Everest that is heading on a collision course with Earth, and Chapman is a planetary scientist for the B612 Foundation. Why does that sound sinister? I don't know, but it does. A non-profit organisation which protects Earth from comets, asteroids and other near-Earth objects. It protects, does it? They've got superheroes. They've got B612 Foundation swings into action to save the Earth from comets and asteroids. From their hidden base in a volcano somewhere. Or on the moon. More like it. Or just off the B612 near Wantage. I'm just making stuff up. I don't know what I'm talking about. By the way, Deep Impact is an excellent film, directed by Mimi Leader, starring a young Frodo Baggins, names again, and also other people. It's got Denise Crosby in it, but it's miles better than... it's also got Tia Leone in it, but it's miles better than Armageddon. Armageddon was whiz-bang, pop action, stuff like that. Deep Impact's a bit more cerebral and a bit more emotional. They're going about Armageddon and Bruce, sacrificing himself and Steven Tyler's daughter crying. That's got nothing on Deep Impact, when Tia Leone gives up her helicopter seat to that mother and with a child. Oh, that sets me off every time. Anyway, perhaps unusual for a big-budget sci-fi flick. By the way, Mimi Leaders, I think we're on her second or third film. She does mostly TV now. She did some big films back in the day. And she's a good director. Anyway. She did The Peacemaker with George Clooney and Nicole Kidman. That's a good film as well. Anyway, perhaps unusual for a big-budget sci-fi flick, Dr. Chapman strongly approved of the film's science, and both he and Y... Is it pronounced Y? Is it pronounced E? I don't know. Why? I don't know. Why? An environmental activist and artist who donates to the B612 Foundation. I still think that sounds sinister. Said that as a work of art, they highly rate the movie's production and creativity. It treats a number of characters in sufficiently intimate detail that viewers get to know them. Yes, you get to know all the characters, including the astronauts that are sent to deal with the comet. Robert Duvall leads them, and that's really good, really good. The Chapmans are far from alone when it comes to scientists and artists who respect Deep Impact, although usually praise has been reserved for its scientific merits. Then again, any kind of long-term high regard for Deep Impact seemed improbable when it was first released in 1998, when most critics mocked the film's attempts to engage in thoughtful character studies. I've always liked it. While some scientists and journalists stepped forward to offer more nuanced takes, the consensus view was to dismiss Deep Impact as little more than a melodramatic companion piece to Armageddon, a Michael Bay-directed, jock-minded asteroid movie, which is fun, but it's like all Michael Bay films. It's annoying after a while. Everybody just shouts at each other. A jock-minded asteroid movie and repeats sentences, ad absurdum. Jock-minded asteroid movie that was released 2 months later, which critics similarly savaged. Yeah. But it's fun, it's fun. Deep Impact, which was released on May 8th, 1998, was directed by Mimi Leader, The Peacemaker, co-written by Bruce Joel Rubin, Ghost. That's a good film as well. Oscar-winning film for Whoopi Goldberg. I think she won an Oscar for that, didn't she? Anyway, and Michael, she was nominated at least, but I'm sure she won it for Best Supporting Actress, I think. And Michael Tolkien, The Rapture, and sported an all-star cast, including Morgan Freeman as the president, Robert Duvall as the lead astronaut chap, Taya Leone as a journalist, Elijah Wood, that's the fella, as Frodo Baggins, Maxi, who discovers the comet. He's an amateur astronomer. Maximilian Schell as Tia Leone's dad. You may know from The Black Hole. He played Dr. Hans Reinhardt. Lili Sobieski, I have no idea. I think she might be the mother I was talking about that Tia Leone gives up a helicopter to see her. Anyway, Kurtwood Smith. Who does he play? I can't remember seeing Kurtwood Smith. I'm sure he's in there somewhere, but I can't remember. I can't remember who he plays. I know we've got James. I forgot his name. Isn't that won the Oscar for Babe? And we're in Star Trek a lot. He's in it as well. But I don't remember Kurtwood Smith. Anyway, and even future Iron Man trilogy director Jon Favreau, is he in it as well? I don't remember seeing him either. I'm going to have to dig it out and watch it again. Anyway, after the deadly comet is discovered by astronomer Dr. Marcus Wolf, Charles Martin Smith, and high school student Leo Biederman, it's actually discovered by Leo Biederman and Dr. Wolf, so confirms it, and therefore it's called Wolf Biederman for the rest of the film is the comet. The movie follows 3 major plot threads. Duvall must lead a team of astronauts, including Favreau. All right. You know what? I never even realised it was him. To either destroy the comet or deflect its path away from Earth. Wood and Sobieski are ordinary civilians hoping... she must play his girlfriend. Hoping to be selected to survive the comet's impact. And Leone is an ambitious MSNBC reporter named Jenny Lerner, whose intrepidity leads her to stumble upon the comet's existence, thereby forcing President Tom Beck Freeman to inform the world in advance. She keeps hearing this phrase, Ellie, and she thinks the president's one of the president's advisors or whatever is having an affair with a woman called Ellie, but she finds out it stands for Extinction Level Event. So that's how she stumbles across it. Lerner also has a moving subplot about reconciling with her estranged father, played by Schell. Yes, and that sets me off as well, where they're on the beach, a bit like in Rogue One, but years before. And they're seeing a wall of water heading towards them, and she goes, "Daddy!" Dead. Grossing nearly $350 million on an $80 million budget, Deep Impact was a financial success, although not as much of a blockbuster as Armageddon, which grossed $553 million on a $140 million budget. This is perhaps unfortunate because while scientists tend to view Armageddon as horribly inaccurate in its physics, including many who spoke to Salon, this is where it's from, by the way, salon.com, scientists whom Salon spoke to whom Salon spoke, get it right, had favourable feelings towards Deep Impact. It's not hard to beat James Cromwell. Sorry, it just popped in me. James Cromwell is the fella on about before that's in it. He was in Babe, wasn't he? And he's in this as well. He plays the press secretary or the president's advisor or whatever that is forced to resign. Anyway, that just reminded me Joshua Cole's initials. Explained Dr. Joshua Colwell, a planetary scientist and physics professor at the University of Central Florida. Colwell, or Colwell, I don't know, who served as a comet advisor on Deep Impact, told Salon by email that the movie's director, producers and writers made a decision to make the movie as realistic as possible while staying true to the story they were telling. They can't be completely realistic, but, it's more realistic than Armageddon. But they can't be completely realistic. This included having a large amount of time separate the discovery of the comet from the time of impact, giving the comet a realistic size, 7 miles, 11 kilometres wide, depicting the comet's features realistically, showing the impact realistically, and conveying the physics of the comet realistically. To the last point, that included conveying the astronauts' near weightlessness on the comet, and having the spacecraft itself tethered to the comet because of its low gravity. Yeah, that was a cool scene. It's like a big shuttle that they're in, and it's like hovering over the surface of the comet, but it fires tethers down so it can stay where it is. It's cool. The movie depicts both an attempt to deflect the comet and also the creation of a subterranean ark to house a large number of people. It's not really an ark, is it? It's what they call it. An ark then, whatever. Not like in 2012 where they actually did build arks, didn't they? But anyway. To survive the catastrophic and long-lasting effects of the impact, Colwell observed both of these activities are plausible, but both require huge resources and a lot of time to put together. Yeah, and it's really well done in the film. Emory University physics professor Dr. Sidney Perkovitz, whose famous criticisms of the pseudoscience in the 2003 sci-fi movie The Core, which is a lot of fun, and the first use of the word, what I remember anyway, of the element unobtainium, never mind Avatar, it was in The Core first, catalysed the creation of the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which works with Hollywood to encourage scientific accuracy, was not involved in making Deep Impact. Yet he also praised the movie as among the most accurate of the sci-fi subgenre that he dubs rocks from space. In addition to Deep Impact and Armageddon, that subgenre includes When Worlds Collide, 1951, classic, sometimes, realistic, but sometimes it pushes it. Meteor, 1979, another classic, but it's not a good film, but it's still fun. Sean Connery and Natalie Wood. Don't Look Up, 2021, which I've not seen. That's a Netflix film, innit? I've not seen that one, but I've heard it's funny. And Moonfall, 2022, which I loved. It's completely mental, and it's, la land physics and science, but it's a lot of fun. I liked it. Deep Impact has the best combination of reasonably correct science, good special effects, a dramatic story, and a look at what a comic strike would mean to people individually and worldwide, Perkovitz told Salon. I think that's the closest to reality a sci-fi film can get. In particular, Perkovitz singled out how Deep Impact's central save-the-world plot, the astronauts must explode nuclear devices from within the comet so that they can alter its course, was pretty close to the truth, at least based on what was known at the time. Oh, I thought we'd done then. Most of the films I've listed imagine that nuclear weapons could deflect or destroy the incoming body, Perkovitz wrote to Salon. That's made explicit in Armageddon, where a NASA scientist calculates that an H-bomb going off deep within the incoming asteroid would split it in two, with the pieces flying off on paths that would miss the Earth. Apparently this would not work in real life, as Perkovitz explains, a group of physics students calculated in 2002 that a hydrogen bomb would yield two asteroid chunks that were a mere 1,200 feet apart, meaning the asteroid of Armageddon would still have struck Earth. I don't know, I suppose it depends, doesn't it, when you blow it up? I'm not sticking up for Armageddon, but they did a thing in the film where if they exploded it and split it, a certain distance from Earth, then the trajectories would make it miss Earth. But if they did it too late, then they both hit. So I suppose it depends, doesn't it? Anyway, Deep Impact partially corrects this. Perkovitz noted the nuclear weapon splits the comet in two, all right, but the smaller chunk lands in the Atlantic Ocean and raises a tsunami that devastates Manhattan. Perkovitz noted that the film still inaccurately shows the larger chunk of the comet being destroyed by a nuclear bomb. The line was, if we explode it in here, it'll leave pieces not much larger than a suitcase, and that's what they said. And obviously, pieces that size would burn up in the atmosphere. That's their reasoning. But gives it points for showing that those nukes could produce collateral damage, which is why NASA no longer advocates for them in this potential situation. In its DART mission last year, it showed the feasibility of using a spacecraft to nudge a space rock off a harmful path, Perkovitz wrote. So Deep Impact gets scientific points for me for correctly using the physics of nuclear weaponry. If you remember, there were they smashed a probe into an asteroid. I forgot the names. I think but as large as I can't remember how big it was now, but it was quite a hefty probe. It weighed several tons. Big, I don't know, but they slammed it into the asteroid, and it actually did move it. To calculate this new trajectory was slightly different. So, in theory, that would work. Didn't have to be a nuclear explosion. Where were we? It also created an awe-inspiring CGI tsunami, which at the time I think was considered a big achievement. It's 1998, remember. Dr. Chapman also praises Deep Impact's scientific chops, and that's saying something given that he attended the first asteroid impact scientific meeting in 1981, which was organised by Gene Shoemaker, another comet advisor for this film, and one of the people who discovered the Schumacher-Levy comet. Remember that one that hit Jupiter back in the day? It split up. It came round Jupiter, didn't it, and got disintegrated, and then its pieces smashed into Jupiter, leaving scars in the atmosphere. Hello, Dees J. Good day, my old friend. I hope you are well. I am very well. I'm just reading about Deep Impact. Anyway, where were we? If some threats like this were to arise, Deep Impact roughly depicts a plausible set of events. Chapman wrote to Salon. How long has this article gone for? It's not going on forever, is it? Bloody hell, it's quite long, isn't it? Crack, I didn't realise. Well, we'll keep going. What the heck? I've got nothing better to do. Where were we? Chapman ticked off the initial discovery of the comet by an amateur astronomer, the Virginia teenager Biederman, Elijah Wood. The follow-up by a professional at Kitt Peak Observatory near Tucson, that was the Dr. Wolf, Charles Martin Smith, who's been in quite a few things, but I remember him from being the director of Trick or Treat, not Trick or Treat, Trick or Treat, starring with Sammy Kerr. Cool film, cool heavy metal horror film. Anyway, but that's by the by. The involvement of NASA and high-ranking government officials going up to the president, Morgan Freeman, the space expedition to implant nuclear devices, preparing alternative civil defence measures like constructing caves to try to preserve elements of civilization if the deflection attempt fails, and the creation of the immense tsunami at the film's climax. No other impact disaster film I have seen has portrayed such a realistic scenario. Other kinds of sci-fi movies generally take place in the more distant future, often involving fanciful elements that are totally beyond today's realities, Chapman concluded. Armageddon is set in today's world, but presents a much less believable story and a totally unrealistic picture of the oncoming celestial body. I mean, it roared, didn't it? In Armageddon, the asteroid roared. Every time they showed it, we're like, anyway, an asteroid, in the case of Armageddon, as big as Texas. This does not mean that Deep Impact is without its inaccuracies. Perhaps the most notable one isn't so much a scientific error as it is a scientific improbability, namely that the mathematical odds are overwhelmingly against a near-Earth object impact event occurring in our lifetimes. Yeah, but they could. They might do. You never know when it's going to happen. It could happen in 1,000 years or 10 years or tomorrow or this afternoon. You just don't know, do you? As they said in Armageddon, it's a big-ass sky. Such an impact is very, very, very improbable in the lifetime of anyone, Dr. David Stevenson, a planetary scientist at the California Institute of Technology, wrote to Salon, "Tell that to the dinosaurs." It would be unwise to obsess over such events when there are things that happen much more often to be concerned about. Well, this is it, don't worry about it, but just realise that it could happen at any time. Indeed, the average length of time between extinction-sized asteroid strikes on Earth is tens or hundreds of millions of years. The time between impacts is probably almost 1 million times the lifetime of any particular individual. Probably even much longer than the total survival time of the human species based on what we know about biological evolution, Stevenson added. Yeah, because we've been around for a couple of million years in fire alarm and smoke alarm on the landing started making noises. Humans have been around in vaguely human for about 2 million years, but about 250,000 years as we are now. And there's been no big asteroid impacts in that time, has there? Not an extinction level event. Although there have been big impacts, there's the Dryas event, isn't there? But the what's it? Younger Dryas, isn't there? Which were cometary impacts and other stuff. Anyway, Chapman echoed Stevenson on the low probability of a near-Earth object collision in our lifetimes, and also pointed out other scientific errors in the film. At one point, the filmmakers implied that the comet got bumped into Earth's orbit by other celestial bodies. Sorry, I've noticed something. Very easily distracted. And my cat's on the windowsill, of course. Soon as I start. Anyway, bumped into blah, blah, blah. But such collisions usually create smaller fragments. Orbital changes are generally caused by gravitational forces, such as nearby planets. And the smaller quibble, movie also purports in an early scene to show the double star Mizar and Alcor, but the photograph on screen is not of them. Similarly, Mizar and Alcor are two stars in the Plough, Ursa Major, some people say it's a binary star, but it's not. It's a line of sight binary star. They're actually a long way from each other. But it's a good test of your eyesight. If you can discern them as two separate stars, you've got really good eyesight. But through that binoculars or whatever, you can see that they're two separate stars. That's what they are. I can't tell them apart because I've got stupid eyes. Similarly, a comet as bright as the one shown in that scene would have been discovered by other astronomers long before Wood's precocious teenage character does so. Well, yeah, it was quite bright. But, it depends who's looking in the right direction at the right time. But, it's only a film. That is not all. I don't understand the attempt to use Titan missiles just days before impact to deflect the body. Whatever they had in mind would never work without violating physics, Chapman noted. It's just a film. Adding that bombs large enough to blow the comet into smaller boulders, which can safely disintegrate in Earth's atmosphere, would have been used much earlier in the film's story. Indeed, waiting until the last second could obviate the plan's entire purpose. I don't think it was days before. I don't think it wasn't at the last minute, I don't think. Anyway, indeed, waiting just said that. It would have to be done much earlier, or the debris would mainly strike the Earth with nearly equal extinction level event consequences, Chapman explained, using the acronym for extinction level event, which was invented by the filmmakers. Of course, as Chapman repeatedly acknowledged, Deep Impact is first and foremost trying to entertain audiences. Slavering. Here, the scientists who spoke with Salon were of one mind. The Chapmans praised the acting, cinematography and special effects, concluding that it deserved better reviews. Stevenson said it ranks high, in particular much higher than Armageddon. Caldwell gave it an enthusiastic thumbs up and recalled one of his students crying at the end. I cry all the time, eh? And Perkovitz had argued that it stands out for the human element it expresses, especially in two scenes, a group of people exiting their cars to watch as the smaller piece of the comet passes overhead, their faces showing that they understand what this means, and TV journalist Tia Leone hugging her estranged father, Maximilian Schell, like a little girl seeking comfort, as I just said before, as the gargantuan tsunami towers over them before utterly destroying them. The people getting out of the cars, there's like a gridlock of people trying to get to safety. But then we see the smaller fragment whoosh overhead, high up in the atmosphere. And all the people get out of the cars and they start trying to get to higher ground because the tsunami's probably going to be on the way. Anyway. Indeed, by telling realistic human stories, Deep Impact further achieves something in the direction of authenticity, trying to depict how a broad swathe of humanity would respond to the literal extinction of our species. If nothing else, one hopes that people will be guided by a strong, confident and wise leader during that period, such as Freeman's character and the undeniable highlight of the movie, President Tom Beck. Yeah, he's cool. I was amused and pleased to read the Gizmodo article's praise for President Beck's speech, presaging the arrival of the wave, because it was taken very closely from my script notes provided shortly before the scene was shot, Caldwell recalled to Salon. Deep Impact co-screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin, whom film critic Roger Ebert called one of the brightest writers in Hollywood, told Salon that he believes the movie and Freeman's performance helped pave the way for Barack Obama, America's first black president, to be elected a decade after the movie's release. Yeah, I'm sure Barack Obama owes his electoral victory to Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact. Unbelievable. This will be fitting with the story's humanitarian genesis. Deep Impact was a natural outgrowth of Rubin being inspired by a 1964 Oscar-winning short documentary called To Be Alive. Watching it as a young man at that year's New York's World's Fair, Rubin recalled being deeply moved by the innovative multi-screen format, which explored the commonalities of different human cultures in the United States, Europe, Africa and Asia. Its basic message, being alive, is a great joy and should be celebrated. Deep Impact, in my mind, has had a bigger canvas at one point, Rubin recalled. There were images of half of Brooklyn standing on the shore watching the comet hit, and the people watching the comet hit. However, that shot was taken out, and the one left in was just the actress Tia Leone and her on-screen father standing and watching the comet. Rubin preferred the community shot. It was about people reaching out and touching and holding each other and knowing this was the end. But it might have been a bit like a Coca-Cola commercial, in my opinion, but never mind. It was existentially potent. It's a good idea, but I think it might have appeared a bit goofy and hokey on film. And I wish it had stayed in the film, but unfortunately, as a writer, you don't control those things. This is not to say that Rubin isn't proud of Deep Impact. Sometimes things he liked which were taken out later got put back in. While he had little to say about the film's development after director Mimi Leader took over, Rubin's individual creative imprint is still all over the final movie, particularly its psychological complexity and progressive message. Yet even within that message there is nuance. Back in the 1990s, the body politic was not nearly as polarised as it is today, and Americans had more faith in their institutions to help and save them. Hence, Deep Impact shows a world where human institutions work as they're supposed to. As far as these days, it'd all be, a conspiracy thriller and all that, wouldn't it? Anyway. Hence, Deep Impact shows a world where human institutions work as they're supposed to. As far as disaster movies are concerned, there's something faintly optimistic about that premise, particularly in contrast with the bumbling governmental response depicted in Don't Look Up. I'm going to have to watch that. It's Pier in the rock from space genre. I haven't seen that one. I've heard it's funny. Indeed, in the Deep Impact cinematic universe, the President is a good man who listens to scientists and offers sage advice. The news media tells the truth to the best of its ability. Teachers pay attention to their students and encourage their intelligence. And the mass of humanity, instead of rioting and acting selfishly at the news of the comet's approach, for the most part remains civilised. That's probably the most unrealistic thing, in my opinion. Rubin wasn't sure if the movie was actually optimistic, though. He recalls changes to the final scene of the film, in which Freeman's president eloquently declared, "Cities fall, but they are rebuilt, and heroes die, but they are remembered. We honour them with every brick we lay." I can't do a Morgan Freeman impression, by the way. "With every field we sow, with every child we comfort, and then teach to rejoice in what we have been re-given." I thought there's quotes here, isn't there? "I have grandchildren. I am very pained by the reality of what I have presented in Deep Impact, whether it's a fictional comet on a collision course with Earth or our own real mishandling of the planet we live on." Who's saying that? No idea. Rubin, maybe? I don't know. Because the end was so depressing, the scene of Morgan Freeman's speech was added after the filming was over, Rubin recalled. They went back and said, there has to be an optimistic speech, a "we will survive" speech, a Independence Day speech. But that was not in the original movie. It was very, very dark. Then Rubin reflected on how, despite his attempt to make Deep Impact dark, the last 25 years of history show reality is even darker than fiction. That includes humanity's failure to address climate change. Don't get me started. American leaders' bungling of the COVID-19 pandemic, not just American leaders, mate, and the increase in prevalence overall of pollution. Well, can't blame the West for that. I mean, the West's doing its best, isn't it? Poetically. It's countries like, I don't know, point fingers, China, India, etc. These, burgeoning industrial nations that they're not doing they're not pulling their weight, are they, in about pollution. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. My feeling is optimism kind of is all we have, Rubin told Salon. I hope it starts... Oh, there is a quote. Oh, fair enough. I hope it starts to generate some kind of action in the world today, but I have grandchildren and I am very pained by the reality of what I've presented in Deep Impact, whether it's a fictional comet on a collision course with Earth or our own real mishandling of the planet we live on. And that's it. Crikey, that took some getting through, didn't it? But yeah, Deep Impact is a top film. Give it a watch. It's better than Armageddon. Well, I think it is. It might not be... the popular vote might go to Armageddon because it's a whiz-bang, action film, innit? But Deep Impact is a better movie. Right, let's move on, or we'll be here all day. New Luke Skywalker timeline unveiled in 2023. Star Wars book. And there's Luke. Young Luke, not quite so young Luke, old Luke. Lucasfilm released an official timeline book for Star Wars, and in it, the full event timeline for Luke Skywalker's life can be found on display for any fans looking to touch upon their lore. When it comes to the most important character in the galaxy far, far away, drinking game, water. Mark Hamill's Jedi is undoubtedly one of the top contenders. He's a bloody star of the scene. From the adventures of Luke Skywalker. That's what it said in the early novelizations. Having first been introduced in the original 1977 film Star Wars, not A New Hope, the character went on from the first trilogy to star in dozens of books and comics. Most recently, he even returned for the sequel trilogy and 2 different Disney Plus shows. Well, sort of came back. Star Wars undoubtedly contains a lot of continuity to keep track of. So it would be completely understandable if some forgot a few important points on the hero's journey so far. Hero's journey, remember that? Remember that used to be a thing? That's why there's never been a better time than now for a recap. Right, the Chosen One is born 19 before the Battle of Yavin. I hate that. I hate that is the official calendrical format before the Battle of Yavin. Makes no sense whatsoever in an in-universe thing. The calendar should be set from the birth of the Empire, the Empire Day or whatever. So it'd be like 19 Age of the Empire or whatever, wouldn't it? Anyway. So they've got BBY and ABY, haven't they? Before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin. As if the Battle of Yavin is some, major thing that affects calendars. Does me head in. Anyway, by the way, I thought it was supposed to be 20. For some reason, it got changed to 19. I remember all the early publicity and stuff for Star Wars back in 77. It was a 20-year-old farm boy. That's all what it was, not 19. Luke and Leia Skywalker were born on Mustafar. No, they weren't. They were born on some sort of station in an asteroid field, weren't they? Nowhere near Mustafar. Their mother, Padme Amidala, did not survive the process. Yes, she did. She just died shortly afterwards of a broken heart. She's lost the will to live. Dr. Ball wasn't impressed. Obi-Wan Kenobi handed Leia off to Bail Organa and his family, while the Jedi Master brought Luke to be watched over by Owen and Beru Lars, and they didn't even change his name. At least they changed Leia's name, didn't they, to Organa. Didn't even change Luke's name, because they're idiots, and because, it wasn't planned from the beginning. George would never admit that, though. Reva pays a visit, 9 BBY. This is in the Obi-Wan series. Bloody awful. When Leia Organa is kidnapped, Obi-Wan is forced to come out of exile to save her. In turn, his adventures led a vengeful inquisitor named Reva right to Luke's doorstep. Luckily, the troubled villain decided not to follow through. Yeah, she became a goodie. Like what everybody predicted. A New Hope, Year Zero. That's not how calendars work. You don't have a Year Zero. You have a -1, or whatever, a year 1, whatever, and then a year 1 after. You don't have a Year Zero. So it should be Year 1, really. A New Hope, Year 1. Thanks to a lucky run-in with R2-D2 and C-3PO, who Luke now owns, technically Owen Lars owns them, technically, Skywalker is pointed in the direction of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or Old Ben, as it were called then. The moment Kenobi was waiting for finally arrived as he trains the boy to become a Jedi. Additionally, Obi-Wan takes the chance to gift Luke his father's lightsaber. Lie to him. He lies to him. Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough, but your uncle wouldn't allow it. But he didn't. He just took it, didn't he? He left Anakin screaming in agony and shouting yelling at him that he hated him. Anakin yelled at Obi-Wan, I hate you. And left him there, legless and armless. And just took it, didn't he? He didn't even know he had kids, did Anakin. He knew kids were on the way, but he didn't know they'd been born. Anyway. And then he went off and murdered the Jawas and Owen and Beru. That's my theory. To get Luke to follow him. On some damn fool idealistic crusade, like his father did. The Scoundrel, Year 1. There he is in the cantina. Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan need a ride to Alderaan to give the rebels a vital information. By the way, I think this is true. They never mention the name Tatooine in Star Wars: A New Hope. I don't think it never mentioned the name of the planet. I think that came afterwards because the filming location for a lot of in Tunisia for a lot of the Tatooine scenes were in a place called Tatooine, spelt differently. But that's where the name came from later, but not actually during Star Wars. It's never mentioned the name. The duo hired Han Solo and Chewbacca and his Millennium Falcon to help get them to their destination. Little do they know that the scoundrel is running away from infamous crime boss Jabba the Hutt. Well, he's not running away from him. He's He's got the money for him, hasn't he? He's got a job, so he can pay him back. He's not running away, although he does end up running away from him. Meeting the Princess, year 1. After the Millennium Falcon is tractor-beamed and captured by the Empire, the team disguises themselves as Imperials to move around the Death Star. Well, stormtroopers. There they run into Princess Leia Organa. The trio's formation would go on to change the course of the entire galaxy and signal the beginning of the end for the Empire. Loss of a hero, year 1. Luke Skywalker's mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, is struck down by Darth Vader because, he wanted him to. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. While devastating, the Jedi sacrifice allows Luke and company to escape the Empire's clutches. Run, Luke, run. One lucky shot, year 1. That's obviously from the special edition. Luke, Han and Leia successfully get vital information to the Rebel Alliance on Yavin 4. The rebels get a new mission. Make a 1 in a million shot to destroy the Death Star. Little did they know at the time, well they did, but we didn't know at the time that that information, the Death Star were kind of faulty. Anyway, thanks to some help from the Force and his new friend Han Solo, Luke does just that, much to Darth Vader's dismay. Yes, he's not happy, is he? As he's spinning away. Spinning. I am dismayed. A fateful vision and defending Hoth 3 ABY after the Battle of Yavin. So year 3. I didn't know that had actually been, cemented in stone. Actually, it was just some time after. I didn't actually know it was actually 3. After just barely surviving a freak accident in the freezing cold, he got attacked by a wampa. Luke experienced a Force vision of Obi-Wan Kenobi telling him to go to the Dagobah system to find Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me. What about Qui-Gon? Unbelievable. Before he was able to act on it, and not long after Han saved his life once again, that's 2 you owe me, Junior, Luke went into action to help the rebels defend themselves from an assault on their formerly secret base on Hoth. This is where audiences saw the iconic AT-ATs, not AT-ATs, the AT-ATs. The little ones are AT-STs. Yes, you can say that. For the very first time. Training with Master Yoda, year 3, we'll call it. There he is. My lightsaber, that is not. Acting on his visions from Hoth, Luke made his way over to Dagobah. It doesn't take him long to find what he's looking for. Grandmaster Yoda. Found someone you have, I would say. The little green legend began to train the Chosen One. However, the duo's training is cut short by some worrying visions. And it's not exactly clear how long he spent training with Yoda. It'd have been better if there was some proper sense of the passage of time, but we don't really know. We know it takes quite a while for the Millennium Falcon to get to the Bespin system from where there is it the I forgot is it NOLAD system or something, I can't remember they are, to get to Bespin because the hyperdrive's broken, so they're going sublight, so it'll take them a long time to get there, but it's never actually said how long. People generally say several weeks, so there must have plenty of supplies on the Falcon, I'm just saying. And his worrying visions he has is of his friends being hurt on a city in the clouds. Right. Falling into the Cloud City trap, year 3. After seeing a vision of his friends in danger, Luke chose to leave Dagobah and abandon his training to save them. In doing so, Luke fell right into Darth Vader's trap. Well, it doesn't go exactly how the Sith had hoped. The young Jedi-to-be loses a hand and learns that the big bad is his father. No, I am your father. And Leia is your sister. And the Force, that's just some microorganisms called midichlorians. Dear. Good old robot chicken. Saving Han Solo for ABY. Right, so Han Solo was in the carbonite. By the way, he got put in carbonite, didn't he? So we're in there for a year, let's say. A year. Which is probably why he gets hibernation sickness. Anyway, following the events of Empire Strikes Back, Luke Skywalker assembled a group of allies to save Han Solo, who was previously stuck in carbonite from the treacherous gangster Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine. After a few failed attempts at communication, everyone is sentenced to death by Sarlacc pit. The pit of Carcoon, the almighty Sarlacc. But we find out in Mandalorian there's a few Sarlaccs knocking about. Anyway, it doesn't go well for Jabba and his crew as Luke and company. I was reading Luke and Company at the same time it came out Lucky. As Luke and company escape after blowing up the crime boss's sand barge. Yeah, whatever. Yoda's death, a new sibling, year 4, which wasn't going to be in. George didn't write it originally for Yoda to be in Return of the Jedi. But Richard, I know I've said this, but Richard Marquand insisted on it that Luke needed to know from Yoda that Darth Vader was his father. George probably had just Obi-Wan telling him, I suppose, but I don't know. Luke returned to the Dagobah system to find Yoda on the brink of death. The Jedi Master passed away at the age of 900, but not before telling Mark Hamill's hero that there is another Skywalker. After confronting a Force Ghost version of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke learned that his secret sibling was none other than Leia herself. Uh-oh. That's problematic, isn't it? Snogging and stuff, all those kisses. Particularly the one in Empire Strikes Back. I mean, the one in A New Hope you can get away with because it's just a peck on the cheek, innit? For look. But he's mooning of her and she's beautiful. And particularly if you read Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the sections in that Luke kind of like drooling over Leia, sorry. Anyway. Father redeemed for ABY. Convinced that there's still good in Anakin Skywalker, Luke surrendered to Darth Vader. Murdering millions of people, just saving your son redeems all that. The hero was then brought in front of Emperor Palpatine aboard the second Death Star. The Sith Lord tried to tempt Luke to the dark side but failed. So be it, Jedi. The Emperor fried Luke with Force lightning, leading Darth Vader to betray his former master by hurling him down a reactor shaft. No. That's in the special edition. God. George, we love you, but you're an idiot at times. Right, Luke trains Leia for ABY. So this is an edition that was in Rise of Palpatine, where we see a CG Leia being trained by Luke and, her being super ace. But she decided not to go the Jedi way. Shortly after the Battle of Endor, Luke Skywalker started to train Leia as a Jedi. The princess is more than proficient, besting Luke in a duel, of course, and even building her own lightsaber. After a vision of her future son's death, she chose to abandon her training altogether. Maybe her son's death at the hands of her brother, because he wanted to kill him, didn't he? For God's sake, I hate it. Grogu becomes Luke's student, year 9 ABY. So this is like, it is, isn't it? After hearing Grogu's call through the Force, Luke Skywalker arrived in the nick of time to save the Mandalorian and Star Wars as a whole and his crew from certain death until Kathleen Kennedy got jealous and fired Gina Carano, thus, putting a spanner in Jon Favreau's well-laid plans. Anyway, Mando parts with the youngling so that Luke can teach him the ways of the Force and one day of the Jedi. The two spent lots of time training, but eventually Grogu decided to go back to Din Djarin instead of continuing his path to become a Jedi. It's also revealed that at some point off screen, before Grogu ever arrived, Luke met Ahsoka Tano, the former Padawan of his father in the Clone Wars. And also, this part of the book contradicts what Jon Favreau said in an interview, saying that Grogu trained with Luke for 2 years. But apparently it was less than a year, probably just a few months, if that. According to this book, anyway, which is supposed to be canon. Anyway, Luke Skywalker takes on Ben Solo, 15 ABY, so this is the young Ben Solo. who would later become Kylo Ren, obviously. There he is. He just felt that Ben was falling to the dark side, so we're going to kill him, and fluffed it. Luke Skywalker took on his first full-time student, Ben Solo. What about Grogu? Wasn't he full-time at the time? The child of Leia Organa and Han Solo. Why do they call him Ben? I've never understood. Han didn't care about Ben. Leia didn't really... Well, she did, didn't she? But she didn't know him as Ben. Why did they call him Obi-Wan Solo? Anyway, technically, young Kylo Ren was Luke's third student, coming in behind Grogu and Leia. Yeah. However, of the three, Ren made it the furthest. Okay. The Jedi must die, 28 ABY. Luke sensed the dark side in Ben. His confrontation with his nephew resulted in the destruction of his new Jedi temple. In response, Luke decided that the Jedi must end, putting himself into exile on Acto. Why the name a planet after the noise that you make when you sneeze? I don't know. But yeah, well, that's what Yoda did, didn't he, as well? You know, he got his arse handed to him by Palpatine. So, into exile I must go. Luke did the same. That's Jedi for you, isn't it? Rey pushes Luke forward, 34 ABY. Rey ventured to Achoo, bless you, Gesundheit, where she discovered a weary, beaten Luke Skywalker. Do you mean weary? While he refused to return from exile, he reluctantly agreed to train her for about 3 days, if that. And then she beat him, obviously, because everybody beats Luke. Luke Skywalker, apart from, the dark stormtroopers, whatever, death troopers, whatever the hell they were. Luke Skywalker dies, 34 ABY. Oh, did he? Anyway, I don't know. Luke projected himself through the Force to create the Salt Planet, where he stalled Kylo Ren so that Leia and the Resistance could escape the First Order's attack. What's left of the Resistance that can fit in the Millennium Falcon. They had a fleet of ships. Shortly after this Force projection fight with Kylo Ren, Luke Skywalker became one with the Force. A guiding Force, 35 ABY. Is that a year later? Yeah, it is. There he is with his massive head. For some reason, his head looks huge. I don't know why. Luke manifested himself as a Force spirit to offer wisdom to Rey. He then led her to where Leia's lightsaber was hidden. Okay, what's next for Luke Skywalker? While Luke Skywalker might be dead at the latest point on the timeline, given how the franchise tells stories all over, he could easily come back at any point. Most recently, Mark Hamill returned as the Jedi for the Book of Boba Fett. There, Lucasfilm used both deepfake technology and artificial intelligence-driven voice acting to make a believable younger version of Luke possible. They hired the fella, like an amateur deepfaker, who redid, because they appeared in end of the Mandalorian season 2. Disney did their own, deep fake, and it looked okay, but it kind of had that uncanny valley thing. And this young fella came along, don't ask me his name, did a better version, so they hired him for the Book of Boba Fett, and apparently now he works for somebody else, not for Disney anymore. Anyway, but how often will they utilise those methods? With a big Mandoverse movie on the horizon from Dave Filoni, it's hard not to wonder if there are big plans for the character. After all, it seems everything is being set in motion so that the movie can softly adapt the fan-favourite novel Heir to the Empire, which heavily involved all of the original cast members, though their roles could easily be swapped with more recent characters such as those seen in The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, or the upcoming series The Skeleton Crew. Jude Law, proper wooden. It would be hard to believe that Lucasfilm is anywhere close to being done telling Luke Skywalker stories. Actually, they've said is done with, is a cobwebbed character or something. They said like that to him, about him. Because Kathleen Kennedy hates George Lucas and all that he created, apart from the name Star Wars. She likes that. At the very least, he'll no doubt pop up in comics and books for years to come. There we go. So there we go. Luke Skywalker's story. Whatever. Star Trek Picard reminds us why we go boldly. This is from the Catholic Reporter. Sorry. Sunday, innit? It's Sunday. There he is. Right, to boldly go where no one has gone before. I bet they mentioned splitting infinitives and stuff. Sounds like it. This line, taken and tweaked from the opening narration of the original 1966-69 Star Trek series, because in that they said, where no man has gone before. In the Next Generation, they say, where no one. Aptly sums up the entire promise and premise of the Star Trek franchise. The casual viewer might get caught up in the narration that precedes it, something about space and strange new worlds and new life and civilizations. It's tempting to write Star Trek off as a silly show about aliens and spaceships and something called a Klingon. Space might be the backdrop, spaceships may be the mode of transportation, and aliens may indeed be everywhere. But where our characters must boldly go is not really a place, not a physical one at least. This is a little bit like a sermon, isn't it? The final season of Star Trek Picard reminded us of this necessary truth time and again. In the Nebula, I came face to face with bleakness. A beaten down, captured but not at all broken Captain William Riker admits to his wife, Deanna Troi. Riker had narrowly escaped. I keep saying he should be Captain Troy, shouldn't he? Because that's the Betazoid way, but obviously he's not respecting that, so he doesn't respect his wife or her Betazoid heritage. Anyway, Riker had narrowly escaped one near-death experience, only to find himself trapped in another. Sorry, I'm just thinking about, well, maybe she respects his human, well, North American traditions. Whatever. The old captain trails off. I haven't felt that bleakness since. A lot has happened since those days on the Starship Enterprise, since Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis originally portrayed Riker and Troy, respectively, on Star Trek The Next Generation. Since those characters were young and going boldly about the galaxy, a lot has happened, but perhaps nothing so significant as their marriage, the birth of their children, and the death of their son, which was stupid. I mean, they just like shoehorned that in because it's to do with AIs. The yawning chasm of grief torn open within Riker by the death of his son could not be escaped, no matter how far into the final frontier he fled. Whether you're on the run from a homicidal changeling intent on the destruction of your entire crew, or you're grappling with the loss of a loved one, the sorrow, grief, the feelings of inadequacy, and lament are the same. Bleakness, darkness. Riker saw in himself and his own pain something of the entire universe. A nebula's worth of nothingness. The scale of it didn't matter, saving his crew or muddling through his own woundedness. Epic or intimate, it required the same courage, the same grappling with self. Blimey. And he had to face it, not to save the galaxy, not to save his crew, simply to understand himself, his own wounds, and then muddle onward in serving, protecting, inspiring those around him. In the series finale, the titular hero, Admiral Jean-Luc Picard, played of course by Patrick Stewart, Sir Patrick Stewart, is faced with his own invitation to boldly go more deeply into grief. The son he's only just met, Jack Crusher, Ed Spaliers, appears to be lost, assimilated into the hive mind, the collective consciousness of the nefarious Borg. Picard risks himself to reach the boy, joining Jack in the hive mind in a last-ditch effort to pull him out. Spoilers, by the way. Jack refuses, claiming that being part of the Borg has cured him of his loneliness, his sense of being perpetually other, and Picard must make a choice. The torpedoes have already been fired, the Borg will be destroyed, and Picard knows this, because the Enterprise D did a Millennium Falcon, Return of the Jedi, run inside the Death Star, and destroyed the Borg cube from within. Here goes nothing and all that. Anyway, but he decides, I think he actually said, I think Data says that, I think. Anyway, but he decides to stay with his son. He decides to be the antidote to Jack's loneliness. He decides to be the kind of father he himself never had. It's a moment of relationship, one that does not have cosmic but rather intimate implications. Those torpedoes are already barreling down on the Borg cube, after all. Picard and Jack can only stand to save themselves. The whole of the universe bound up in a simple gesture. Picard glimpses something of himself, of who he was and might yet be, of the meaning behind the ongoing mission of his life. What they're trying to say there is, they're going to die, but they're going to die free, sort of thing. And save themselves they do. Picard's Season 2 quest into his own past has prepared him to give freely of himself now in Season 3. Well, they don't save themselves. The Enterprise D saves them. Actually, it's Deanna saves them because she senses where they are, particularly in Riker. And they get beamed out just in the nick of time. Anyway, to dig deeply into who he is and who he is becoming, the legacy he swore he never needed, the French Jesuit priest and scientist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, apologies, wrote, "The deeper I descend into myself, the more I find God at the heart of my being." This is the Catholic Reporter, remember. The God who pursues me in the task as endless as the whole sum of centuries of the incarnation of his Son. Buried within the quietness of our own stories and the relationships they point us to, we encounter the entirety of God's creation, and within the vastness of God's creation we are drawn back into ourselves, into the uniqueness of who we are and are becoming. The invitation, the challenge of Star Trek is to boldly go deeper and deeper into what is alien about ourselves until nothing remains unknown, deeper and deeper into what it means to be human. Space may be the final frontier, but its vastness is but a mirror held up to the inner journey our characters, and by extension each of us viewers, must make within ourselves. The desire to know ourselves is ongoing work, or as Data says, it seems being human is just as difficult as the desire to be human, and infinitely more complex than I ever considered. Oh, that's it. Yeah, but it's kind of ironic that Star Trek is kind of a secular place, isn't it? But they don't really cover religion, although it is mentioned quite often. But the Federation is not is a secular place, isn't it? But there are, obviously religions within it, but it's not. Being a Starfleet officer, you don't believe in God. There are forms of life so powerful that they might be mistaken as gods, such as the Q, for instance, or the wormhole prophets, but they're just more advanced forms of life. When all's said and done, but here endeth the liturgy for today. Right, Buzz Aldrin loves this sci-fi movie classic, and we trust him. If you've been to the moon, then your opinion on the best science fiction movies has to be well worth listening to. So here's Buzz Aldrin to make his choice, and there he is. Has he had his porridge, his oatmeal? I hope so. If you're trying to find a definitive answer as to the best science fiction movies ever made, you could do a lot worse than asking someone who's actually been to the moon. Allegedly, he has. Thankfully, Buzz Aldrin has elaborated on his picks for the best movies of all time. Oh, excuse me, Numbo. Aldrin was one of the first men to walk on the moon in 1969, second technically, and he thinks that one of the best Stanley Kubrick movies stands higher than other sci-fi adventures. When asked by Rotten Tomatoes to choose his 5 favourite films, Aldrin reached for 2001: A Space Odyssey and spoke about its ability to look forward into the future as one of the reasons for it being so special. The projecting forward of Arthur C. Clarke was just such a marvel of imagination, but not just guessing. I mean, he predicted that communication satellites would rotate at the same rate that the Earth rotates. Well, some of them do, don't they? I forgot to call them now. I forgot to call them now. Geostationary orbit, that's what I'm thinking of. They're in orbit travelling, so they remain stationary over the equator. Now, that was a brilliant observation, he said. In a way, it prompted me to think about creating imaginary situations in the past, in the present, and off into the future, being as true to reality as possible. Clarke wrote an epilogue for the book Aldrin and his colleagues on Apollo 11 penned, which brought the author and the astronaut together for a significant social occasion. That's Arthur C. Clarke, obviously. Does it mention him? Oh, it does there. Aldrin said, because of his contributions and my appreciation of those, and having met him on several occasions, I just was compelled to arrange a cruise so that I would get to spend a day with Arthur Clarke in 2001. I see what you did there. If there was any doubt that Kubrick's classic is up there among the best adventure movies in space, then surely the vote of appreciation from Aldrin settles the debate. He's the expert after all, and it's a cool film. I saw it in the cinema myself, not in 1968, in 1978 when it was re-released. I was 11 and I went to see it and I had no idea what was going on. But it's still a cool film, particularly on the big screen. And it had an intermission. And it's not that long compared to films that are out now. Bring back intermissions, that's what I say. We've also got all the information you need about the future of science, blah, 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 blah. So there we go. So Buzz Aldrin likes 2001. I wonder what his other 4 films were. Probably Ruby. I bet there's like a war film in there about fighter pilots and stuff, because, you know, there's a pilot and that in it. I don't know. Right, moving on. Star Trek. Why Captain Shaw won't call Hansen 7 of 9 in Star Trek Picard. I've got a bit of a bone to pick with this one. Not that I've read it. It might be completely different what I'm thinking, but we'll see. The 3rd season of Star Trek Picard was carefully constructed by showrunner Terry Matalas to reunite the central cast of Star Trek The Next Generation and gather them on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Spoilers, by the way. Some of the introductions... that smoke alarm keeps chirruping. Some of the introductions felt fair and organic, others felt a little contrived. The inclusion of the Enterprise D, a ship that had been destroyed in 1994 Star Trek Generations, was most certainly forced. Yeah, what a bit. But for many, it's still cool though, but for many the nostalgia was exhilarating, and seeing a 105-year-old Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, back in action for one last Borg rescue was a thrilling way to end the character's career. Amid all the nostalgia, however, Matalas managed to introduce a fun, exciting new character into the mix, Captain Liam Shaw, Todd Stashwick, the captain of the USS Titan A. I was never a Shaw fan. I don't know what people saw in him. He was all right. I didn't hate him, but I didn't think he was anything special. Shaw was thrilling because, unlike most Starship captains, he felt no impulse to stand on formality. Star Trek, especially The Next Generation, was always stringently formal. Shaw didn't give a damn. He was curt, unfriendly, and demanded that rules be followed. He even deleted Captain Riker's jazz collection from the ship's database. Shaw hates jazz. Previously an engineer, Shaw was hell-bent on the letter of the law and became frustrated and impatient when people bent the rules based on instincts. Audiences loved him. Shaw's first officer was 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan, the former Borg character carried over from Star Trek Voyager. Prior to being assimilated by the Borg, 7 was a human named Annika Hansen. Since being extracted from the collective, however, she embraced her new identity as a former Borg and became reborn as a new person. Shaw repeatedly refused to refer to 7 by her preferred name, always calling her Commander Hansen instead. Matalas, in an interview with Collider, explained why Shaw was so brusque and disrespectful towards 7. There he is, the dipshit from Chicago. Of course, Shaw has a very good reason to hate someone who was formerly a Borg. Shaw, as he explains in one episode, was present at the Battle of Wolf 359, the Borg attack from the famous Next Generation episode, The Best of Both Worlds. September 24th, 1990. That's when the episode that happened, not the battle. He explained that at the time he was only a young engineer eager to start his career on a Federation starship, just like I said before we found all that out. But people poo-pooed me and said, no, that's not what happened. But it is. So there. So don't poo-poo me again. I know what I'm on about sometimes. The Borg attack, led by an unassimilated Picard, wiped out his ship's entire senior staff and 40 or so other officers that outranked him. Shaw had to take command. Being a captain, it seems, was a career track he never wanted to be on, but was stuck on nonetheless. Is that what happened? I don't know. That's not what happened in the episode. He said they went to the escape pods and ice cream vans arrived. Unbelievable. Where were we? They went to the escape pods and they couldn't decide. There weren't enough escape pods. There were too many people of the escape pods, and he said an officer came along and just started picking people at random, and the last one was Shaw, so he was saved, and all the people who were left behind were destroyed. So I don't know where they got that from. Anyway, Shaw then looked at both Picard and 7 of 9 with a less than diplomatic eye, traumatised and stuck with a job he kind of hates. Shaw resented that 7 and Picard demanded respect. All he saw were the soulless cyborgs they once were. Eventually, Shaw's suspicions will be proven true. Picard's brain never fully shed its Borg influence and allowed his progeny to infiltrate an entire fleet of starships. # Shaw was right. Terry Metalis chalked up Shaw's refusal to address Seven by her chosen name as stemming from that trauma. He won't use a Borg name. Shaw grows to respect Seven, but it's conditional. He still has issues, Metalis explained. I don't know how conscious he is of it sometimes, because he shows her a tremendous amount of respect at the end of this episode, which is, Hansen, you take this one. He lets her blow up the Shrike. So there's a mentorship there, because they just had that disagreement about consequences and whatnot. He wants her to be great in that moment, allowing her to have that satisfaction. Yeah, but he still don't call her Seven, does he? The Shrike was a massive, well-armed super vessel that the season's villain Vadik, Amanda Plummer, used to terrorise our heroes. We don't know where she got it from. There's a lot of unanswered questions in Picard Season 3, to be honest. In the show's 7th episode, Vadik is bested and the Shrike is destroyed. Commander Seven is permitted to give the order to destroy it. Even in that moment of triumph, though, Shaw calls his first officer Hansen. Terry Metalis didn't see this as a deliberate slight, but merely further evidence that Shaw hasn't come around yet. How long does this article go on for? Oh, we're nearly done. I don't think him not calling her Seven in that moment is him withholding consciously anything. I think he sort of has his own demons that just stop him from doing that, but we'll see what happens. Shaw, despite being a self-described a-hole, was beloved by many fans, with Trekkies comparing him to the equally curt Captain Edward Jellicoe from the Next Generation episode 2-part Chain of Command. Sadly, he did not survive the events of Star Trek Picard. He'll be back. His final words were encouragement to Seven of Nine and the usage of her desired name, which, totally out of character. You'd think he would double down on calling her Hansen, because he was killed by Borg. It seems in his last moments he came around. Sadly, there doesn't seem to be a graceful way to resurrect the character, as a year passed between his death and the show's epilogue. So it goes. Some have said he could come back as like an engineering hologram or something like that. I don't know what they'll do. Metalis has said he would love to work on a new series called Star Trek Legacy, #Star Trek Legacy, with Captain Seven of Nine on board the Titan A, rechristened the Enterprise G, which they shouldn't have done. Shouldn't have done that. She should have remained the captain of the Titan A, and they should have had a new ship, a new big exploratory ship called the Enterprise G, with somebody else in command. Riker, put Riker in command of it. A fine enough idea for a series, but prior to the end of Picard, many hope for a Star Trek Legacy with Shaw and Seven on board. The unrechristened Titan A constantly butting heads as they get into Star Trek adventures. That too would likely have been a fine series. Yes, it would. I think it's made a mistake. It's made a few mistakes, as Terry Metalis, in my opinion. But it was still a great series and a great send-off. But it could have been little things, that he could have tweaked that would have made more sense to fans. But it was still great. I still enjoyed it. Right, last one. Norwich housing estate in NR3 shaped like the Millennium Falcon. There it is. Oh dear. Why is this Norwich housing estate shaped like an iconic Star Wars spaceship? Shall we find out? Is it just a coincidence? Have you ever looked at Mile Cross on a map? You might have noticed that one housing estate seems to have a passing resemblance to one of science fiction's most recognisable spaceships. By deliberate design or mere coincidence, Civic Gardens shares the same shape as Han Solo's famous spaceship, the Millennium Falcon. The estate's similarity to the ship is hard to miss from the air, but could easily be missed at ground level. What's more surprising is that it is not the only housing estate of its kind in the UK. The Oakdale estate in Caerphilly, Wales, also bears an uncanny resemblance to the ship and was featured in a tweet that was liked by the official Star Wars Twitter page. There we go, there's another one, look. According to the tweet, the estate was planned by a fan of Star Wars, although this claim could never be verified officially. Pareidolia is a phenomenon where people see familiar patterns, shapes, and even faces in inanimate objects or places. It could be the estate shape is merely coincidence, which is more than likely, or the work of a Star Wars loving town planner. Norfolk County Council planning officials were approached for comment, but obviously didn't give one. But anyway, there it is. It's amusing. It's amusing and nothing more. So I just thought we'd... And finally, story. Right, we'll leave it there, because I've got to go and sort my son out. He's getting angry upstairs for some reason, and the smoke alarm's twittering, and bloody cats on the windowsill wanting to come in, and kids are shouting outside, and there's people mowing the lawns, I can hear them in the distance, and ice cream vans are going past. Oh, it's a crazy world I live in. Right, so we will leave it there. So, thanks for watching. Wherever you are, look after each other. And until next time, I'll see thee.